Okay, first up, showing us his studio setup is John. Okay, what are we starting with?
Okay, what I'm going to do is take you through the vocal setup first. So we're going to go step by step through the signal chain right to the computer. Cool? So we're starting off with the mic. This is an SEZ3300A. It's not the most neutral mic because it emphasizes a lot of the highs, but I find that that works for our songs and the style of music we play. So I like the sound of it very much. So this is where the vocal goes into, and that takes you to the preamp next. Alright, so the mic is plugged directly into this. This is a Focusrite Voice Master Platinum Pro. It comes with the preamp, so that's where my preamp comes from. And it's got lots of cool effects that I like to use as well. It's got a nice tube sound emulator, a little nice feature called Vintage Harmonics. It adds a lot of the higher top end that gives it a sort of a Freddie Mercury, Queen sound, vintage sound actually. So that's quite a cool effect that I like to use. And that goes into, compressor as well, very important. Compressor, and that goes into my interface. This is a Focusrite as well, a Sapphire Pro 40. And this is what connects the signal or translates that audio signal into a digital signal for the computer, right? Just a side note, this is quite a nice piece of equipment because for a relatively low price, this has saved us a lot of additional equipment that we need to use because we use this for recording all our instruments and we also use it as a mixer when we rehearse. So when we rehearse as a band together, everybody is plugged into this and it has its own nice little digital mixer right here. And that's what we use to give everybody a nice individual mix in their headphones or on the speakers or whatever it is. So that's the interface, Sapphire Pro 40, and that goes into my computer, which is not an incredibly expensive Mac like most people like to use. It's a simple PC setup, self-assembled from one of our stores in PJ. And that's the main recording hub where all the stuff is done. So the vocals goes into the computer and I record into Cubase. I think for the recording geeks out there, you know that most people have their digital audio workstation or DAW preferences. Personally, I think they're all pretty much the same. They do the same things, just that each one is good at different things. So Cubase just happens to be the one that I got used to and started using. So I use Cubase 6.5, soon to be upgrading to 7. And that's where all the vocal processing later is done. For reverbs, for example, I tend to use Cubase onboard reverb, very simple. No need to spend anything extra for that. And that pretty much concludes the vocal setup. For the guitars, as you can see, I've got a pretty nice collection right here, but I tend to use this for recording. This is actually an old Squier Bullet. It was a gift to me, and it's got a very nice sound. It tends to work for most of the songs that we do. And this and the bass as well. This is the bass that I use to record all our stuff. It's a vintage Japanese bass, bought for very, very cheap. I like finding good deals. It's very cheap, but apparently it was made in the factory that made the Fender Japanese guitars when they first started making them in Japan. So it's got a really nice vintage sound and quality sound for the price. And both of these two go into this, the Pod HD500 by Line 6. The HD500 pretty much works as my amplifier. If you notice in the studio, compared to most recording studios, there are no amplifiers here at all. And that's pretty much the way we like to keep it. We have a very, how should I say, modern, digital, forward-thinking approach to recording. None of the, it has to be old school and with massive amps. So all of the amps that I use come right from here. And before we go into this, I do use some effects by TC Electronic. Got a Spark booster. It works as a booster and also as an overdrive. Very nice, transparent sound. And if I need delays also, I use this. It's a Flashback X4 or x4, I'm not sure, by TC Electronic. This is a very nice delay pedal. Lots and lots of options for your delays. And we tend to use a lot of delays in our songs as well. So this is what we use for delay. And all of this goes into the Pod HD500. So as I mentioned, the amps come from here. And to make sure I don't have a pedal board that is about 30 feet wide, anytime I want any additional effects or something more exotic like maybe a step tremolo or a whammy, for example, I'll use it from here because the HD500 has loads of onboard effects on this. So all of the guitar and bass is recorded through this. This is called bass amps as well. So I record my bass and guitar through this. And this is a USB connection straight to the PC, so I don't need to do anything else with it. Or optionally, I can record with a 1/4 inch out as well. So that will take the audio signal from this straight to my interface, and that interface translates the signal to the computer for me. and that's how we record our guitars, bass, and vocals. As for keys, I guess finally, before we move on to Andrew, who is still setting up, drummers always take forever to set up. Yeah. While we move on to the keys, this is the keyboard that I use. It's not a very big deal. We tend to change keyboards pretty often because I use pretty much exclusively MIDI. So I just use the keyboard as a trigger to get my sounds from the computer. I'm a pretty big fan of Native Instruments. Pretty much all my MIDI sounds come from Native Instruments. And they have a great package called Complete. So with that, you've got lots of my synth sounds. You've got guitar sounds as well. Like sometimes for the bass, I record the bass clean in, and then I use Guitar Rig, which comes with Complete, to get the distortion on the bass, a little bit of overdrive. So likewise, Native Instruments Complete comes with a nice synth sound called Massive. And with that, you've got lots of nice ambient sounds or dirty synth sounds. So I use the MIDI controller to trigger those sounds. So you can have like really nice pad sounds, like for example, kind of sounds that we can use. Just one of the many sounds that you can get out of this for a very, very cheap price. And Native Instruments always has offers as well. So I got this for 50% off. Lots of sounds. I used some of the reverbs as well. And that's what we use for keys. All MIDI triggered by Native Instruments sounds. Pretty much everything that you see here is actually courtesy of our friends from Sonica. They pretty much supplied everything. Oh, last of all, I guess, everything is mixed in the box, that is using the computer, which some people are dead against, but I'm not very fussy for these things. So mixed on the computer, and I use these speakers as my monitoring of my references. These are Event 2020s, and very nice balanced sound, nice low end as well. Not very expensive. That's about it for our studio setup.